Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Kristine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Kristine Madera, and we are here today with Jana Roemer. And Jana has combined her two great loves, which are astrology and yoga nidra, to create astro nidras, which is a wonderful meditative practice where your body relaxes to a deep state and your awareness remains online and you really do some deep inner work. Jana also has a wonderful membership community called Attuned to the Moon. And you can also find all of her information in our show notes at conversationsfromtheedge.net. Welcome, Jana. It's nice to have you back.
Well, thank you so much. I can't believe we're almost all the way through the entire zodiac. We have Aquarius and Pisces, and then we've circled the zodiac.
It's been a really interesting march through the zodiac in a kind of life coach way, because you talked about the zodiac as being a sort of life coach that if you follow it and you begin to attune to aspects of it and the energies of it, really begin to show you how to live your life in a more holistic and helpful way. And I've certainly found that through our conversations. So I really appreciate the time that we've had to roam the zodiac together.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a nice backdrop to reflect on how we do life, like how you're doing life. And then also to bring your attention to certain topics or to certain areas of your life that in a perfect world, we're balanced. But in reality, we tend to fall off balance a little bit. And so astrology can help to restore balance to our holistic self.
Well, excellent. And as we're coming into Aquarius and Pisces, we're coming to the end of the zodiac. So that reconnection to our divine and to the divine and to all that is. So it's an exciting topic to explore. And we're going to start today with Aquarius. So tell us a little bit about Aquarius. I'm excited to hear more about it.
Yeah, I love Aquarians. It's interesting because you just said it's the restoration of the divine, but Aquarius is actually where we find a lot of science and research and technology and innovation and inventions. And Aquarius is the third mental sign of the zodiac. It's actually an air sign. People think because it has those two waves and it's the water bearer that it's a water sign, but it's actually an air sign. And I like to think of those two waves as, well, probably when it was drawn, it wasn't this, but that's the communication through the invisible realm, like air waves or sound waves, like the internet or telepathy.
It's like we've got those field waves that is supposed to be moving through us and we're moving through it all of the time. Like everything in its natural state is in wave form before it becomes material form.
Exactly. And so when we look at Aquarius, we're looking at how we can, through our mind, connect to the supra-consciousness. So this is the consciousness of all that is. And actually, I love that you brought in the waves because you can think of Aquarius kind of like the gateway to the quantum, right?
Ooh, yeah.
And what's interesting is I say it's the head, but it rules the ankles and the circulatory system. And so an Aquarius that's detached from their heart is only half present because the heart and the circulatory system, and when we look at the way that the body works, when we're looking at coherence, which allows us to connect to the superconsciousness, the heart has to help tell the mind, like the heart directs the mind in order to create that heart coherence through the body. And that's what's necessary in order to get the chemicals that change the state that allow us to connect to the superconsciousness. I started by saying it's more scientific and innovative, but if we look at some of these incredible inventors like Nikola Tesla or even Einstein, they would probably tell you, or it has been hypothesized that they're actually channeling information. Like, where did all that information come in? They're mystics, they're listening. And so that's why the heart is such an important piece to activate in Aquarius, but they can be super heady.
Well, yeah. And I wanted to bring that up because we have in our culture, we are so head oriented, and even that whole idea of mind over matter, that, what I control in my mind, I control everywhere else in my being and my life, which we all know if we've lived more than a couple of days is not actually true. But that place of being in a mental sign, and I've got an Aquarius moon, so I'm very mental in that realm. I'm very water and other things, but very mental with that mentalization that we really focus on almost requires that we leave our heart in the way that we do it in our culture. So how do you talk about being able to bring the heart back into that place of leading the mind instead of being shut down by the mind?
That's a really deep and long question to answer. But I think that if we can continually remember that the heart leads the way, if we think about if we're making decisions, if we're innovating, let's say through technology, through the internet, especially right now in this time of, all this incredible technology that can lead us towards transhumanism, like Nick, what's his name? Elon Musk is talking about the Neuralink, where you just put a chip in your brain and you're directly connected to the internet, or other technologies where they're able to put a chip in somebody who's been blind their whole life and all of a sudden they can see. And when we look at innovation and technology like this, it's so important that the leaders of this realm are living in a high moral, like with really great values and living from their heart, because this technology, as great as it can be, it can also destroy us. And so I think we're never going to be able to control how technology is used to the degree that some people may want to. But if we can lead the way, like if the leaders of the technology are rooted in their heart and are choosing to use it for the benefit of humanity. And I don't know, it's tough. This is such a massive debate, right? Like, isn't this one of the greatest debates of our time as we move towards this technology that's ultimately changing the way a human body works? Wow. Right.
Well, yeah. And Elon Musk, and I'm not sure if it was with you that I had this conversation, but Elon Musk had a quote that I can't quote directly, but he basically was talking about how, as a business person, as the way that we run our culture, he has to pursue AI and AI driven things that he's not personally convinced are actually healthy and good for the planet, because if he doesn't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And so he's driven to have to do these advances, even if they may be potentially catastrophic because of the way our society is organized. And that, if they were able to choose how to move forward, separate from this way that we've organized things, that we just continually have to pursue technology for technology's sake, even if it runs us off a cliff. If you're able to pursue that from the heart, you're able to make much different decisions, even as a business. But you can't make those business decisions from the heart when the bottom line and shareholders and profits are the thing that are driving the system. So I thought it was really interesting that he was able to articulate the difference between that as a business person.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a really interesting time to be observing. Aquarius has a massive impact on us right now, because the winter solstice of 2020, not 2021, of 2020, we had Saturn and Jupiter conjunct, which happens only every 20 years, but every 800 years it changes the element that it happens in. So it was one of those elemental changes. So this is a monumental shift in the way, like the karma of society and the way society expands. And it's happening in Aquarius. And so these topics are like front and center, at least from an astrological perspective. But when I go look into the world, it is a massive debate on how we use these technologies.
So going back to that for a second, what is the elemental change that happened? And what does that mean for us?
Yeah, well, it is about information. We are being inundated with information. Aquarius is definitely an informational sign. And I think everybody would agree. We have more information at our fingertips than ever before. Our ability to access, but also there's this collective expectation that people will know everything that's causing a lot of confusion and disharmony.
Mm-hmm.
And how we organize information and how we move through information is one of the bigger themes. And it's hard to say exactly how it will play out long term, because we're looking at an innovation at a level that we have not yet seen before. So the future that's coming is something we haven't even imagined yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's challenging. I think before it was in an earth sign. For 200 years, the conjunctions were happening in earth signs, and earth signs, things tend to move slower. Air signs now, where they'll be for the next, it's not quite 200 years, it's like 180 some years. They're going to be, things are going to be moving faster. And I think we can already see that the rate of change is so quick, it's difficult to stay caught up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like I said, we can talk about what the astrology means, but we don't know how humans are going to play with it. I think I use the analogy of how one human responds to rain versus another. Some people stay indoors, and some people strip off their clothes and dance naked in it. And some people put on their puddle boots and go outside and jump in puddles. And it's the same weather that's coming, but how we interact with it and how we use it is really up to us. And so it's impossible to say what's to come, but it's definitely looking at some of the qualities of Aquarius. So if we look at some of those qualities, I always joke, and maybe this isn't a joke, is that Aquarians, they always seem to be wiser than their years, or they will feel like an outsider, like they don't belong, or sometimes they feel like they were born in the wrong era, the wrong decade. And so the joke that I make is that they're actually time travelers. They're spies, or they're maybe not spies, maybe bringing in information. They're the prophets that come from a different time and place, and they try and warn humanity, hey, this is what's going on. And they're really concerned about humanity, but humanity's not ready to hear some of the things that Aquarius wants to say or wants to warn about. Or sometimes the innovation, people are like, no. Because I mean, that's part of the debate with the innovations that's going on right now. People are like, no, that's dangerous. And other people are like, this is the best innovation we've ever seen. And so our ability to take that information in and what we're doing with it, or not only the information, but the innovation and what to do with it. Of course, we're going to have these wild debates on how to do it. But that's the nature of humanity. And this is the sign of humanity. And when we look at Aquarius as a individual, they often, sometimes people will say they're not super connected to their emotions, but I would beg to argue that maybe it's that they're not invested emotionally in the way that other signs would like them to be. Because it's not that they don't have emotions, it's that they move through it so quickly, and they're able to move into that 40,000 foot perspective quite quickly, which that's the super consciousness, to see the whole perspective, to see things from multiple perspectives. And they're able to release or let go or innovate or adjust course or whatever needs to happen in order to move to the next place. And they don't like feeling restricted or confined, or they oftentimes don't do super, super well in marriage. And I'm talking about sun specifically now, not moon, because they can be seen, or they can experience a lack of commitment. Like they don't want to commit. They want to be able to have fun and play and be free and, do what they want to do. Yet at the same time, they can be incredibly emotionally invested in their work. And so if their work is something that they love, like the humanitarian, you look at some of the great humanitarians of the world, like over time in history, they're like married to their work, right? And so I actually got a couple Aquarius sun people that we would know, like Lincoln, Edison, Franklin Roosevelt, Evangeline Adams. They're all Aquarians. And so you look at like Thomas Edison, he was married to his work, right?
Yeah.
And so in order for humanity to be whole, we all have to fill different roles. And Aquarius is they're fringe, they're outside of the mainstream. And because of the way they're able to see the world and take information and reorganize it and create something new that's never been seen before. But then it often leaves them feeling misunderstood or rejected, or like they don't belong anywhere. And so it's a really, that isn't that the paradox of life. Sometimes it's like what you're really good at ends up being both your wound and your wisdom. And what's also interesting is that when we look at traditional astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Yet once we found Uranus, they put Uranus in Aquarius as well. And Uranus and Aquarius, when we look at the mythology of them, they didn't one was the father and one was the son, and I believe the son ended up killing the father in the mythology. I'm not a mythology expert, so if there's any fact checkers out there, I could be wrong. One of them killed the other one, because they really didn't see eye to eye, because Saturn is a traditionalist and Uranus is an innovator, is an inventor. And oftentimes what we even see within Aquarius is they come from two camps. Some feel more attuned to Saturn and some feel more attuned to Uranus. And so even within their own sign, there's this split. Only 1/12 of the humans are going to be Aquarius-ish, 1/12-ish. And so for all of us, while we're in Aquarius season, it's an incredible time to actually understand what makes you uniquely you. Like if Aquarius is a rebel and an outsider and kind of marches to the beat of their own drum, when we're in that time in this season to reflect on what makes you is really going to help you to become more beneficial to the whole, because we're asking ourselves the questions such as, how do I fit in society? What's my role in humanity? And if I'm not if I'm not taking the time to understand who I am as a puzzle piece in this bigger puzzle piece of 8 billion pieces, right? Then how do I play a valuable role in society?
Well, I'm going to pause that for a moment, because what you're saying is really, really important. And oftentimes, when we think about what am I here to do? Who am I here to be? We think about it from like our personal perspective, our limited perspective point of view. And what you're saying, it seems like, is that Aquarius invites you to take that larger view of who am I within the whole of humanity? And how am I here to be a part of the whole of humanity rather than just focus on my own personal story?
That's right.
To me, it seems like the whole era that we're in is the era of inviting people to look within to themselves, but also, to combine with all of humanity and see who we are within the whole story rather than focusing only on our own story. I mean, it seems like that's what's going to be the thing that carries us through to something positive, rather than everybody overly focusing on themselves and running 1,000 or 6-7 billion different directions, that would begin to think about, okay, who am I personally and who am I within the whole, and how do we as a whole begin to move to something that is enriching to all of us, as opposed to me forgetting about everybody else and just focusing on me.
Yes. And that is such an important question. And I think the healing that we can go through during this time is, am I actually making these decisions from a loving place? So an example, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day who said something that really shocked me. And, it was definitely, she wasn't considering, she was acting from fear instead of love. We'll just leave it at that. And I questioned her on it. I was like, really, you think that's the way it should be? Like, that seems that feels like a really big lack of love in what you're saying. And after we talked about it for a while, she ended up saying, I realized that I'm acting from a really primal place lately. I'm making decisions and my opinions are quite rooted in fear. Instead of thinking about others, I'm only thinking about my fear and my safety. And after, we went back and forth about the topic, she ended up saying, interesting. I'm glad that we had this conversation, because I can see how me only protecting me can be quite harmful to quite a number of people. And I'm leaving it really vague intentionally, because I think that that's as a vague guidance to anything that you're feeling, to go in and ask that, like, am I making these decisions or sharing these memes or voting for things that are rooted in my own fears or my primal reactions, rather than actually feeling into is there another way that this can be done that would be more loving for everybody?
Yeah, because that energy of love, I mean, it's expansive and it takes us out of our own habits and patterns, and it gives us a new level of energy to operate from. And I know, you know, you look around the world and you think sometimes that you're the only person that has actually tried to live from a state of love, but that's not true. It's just that, you know, what sells news media, what sells other things is when we focus on, you know, the anger and the hatred and the division. And to be able to, even if it's in your own meditation, to expand in that state of love and just connect with the energy of that and other people who are operating from that you don't have to know them necessarily, but if you know that they are there and you can ride that wave of love, it helps you to make better decisions for yourself and to see how things are unfolding from that, you know, that 4 mile perspective up high, that you can begin to see larger patterns versus the knee-jerk kind of reactions that we have to every little thing that happens in the details.
Yeah. Well, and here we are. And it's super hard. I put a poll up on my Instagram, the Attuned to the Moon Instagram. I put a meme that was like, can we release everything that isn't rooted in love? And then I asked, can you do it? Yes, love's the answer. And then the other one was like, no, it's so hard. And it was, the percentage was something like 12% said it's no, it's so hard. And one of the people that voted no sent me a DM and said, oh, so there's only 12% of the people that are actually being honest. And it just made me laugh so hard, because as much as this idealistic, which is very Aquarius, by the way, this idealistic view of like, oh, let's live from love. It is literally one of the hardest things to do, to not act from our primal self. But, you know, and that's one of the beautiful things about Aquarius, is that we can go into more optimism and we can go into more idealistic thinking, which can get us out of some ruts, but also can have us not facing reality as it is at the same time. So here we are.
Well, you know, there's also then we'll jump ahead to the other stuff. But there was one more thing I wanted to say about that, is when you begin to focus on something like love and not the airy fairy pie in the sky, I'm not going to see it. I won't look at negativity ever, because, you know, then you'd never look at anything. But the whole idea that when you begin to see what you look for, and so when you're in fear, you see more fear. When you are aspiring to live in your own love and to recognize your own reactions and to step out of them, and you begin to ask yourself to look for those places where that's happening in your friends, in the world, in, you know, other places in society, at the animal shelter, you know, wherever you happen to find it, you know, these beautiful stories of people acting quite selflessly for, you know, animals or for the environment or for another person, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, you actually find those. And then it helps to validate that there is a lot more love in the world than what we see on the surface level, and certainly what we see when we're coming at it from a place of fear.
Isn't it true? Yeah, I love just getting out on the ground level and seeing what's actually happening. That's the place to find it. You look at humans, you look at what humans are actually doing versus what you see portrayed, and it is a completely different story. And humans are good. Humans want to be connected. Humans want to do good. Of course, there's some bad apples out there. And of course, where there's people, not even bad apples, just so traumatized that it's difficult to see beyond, or, you know, caught in generations of trauma. But ultimately, even those people that may be causing harm unintentionally, they also want to be loved and to love. They also want to do good. It's sometimes the map hasn't been drawn out of it, but yeah, humans, I love humans. And that's so Aquarian too, actually. So thanks for bringing that in, because it's the humanitarian. And another thing that we find during this time is, I always say in Aquarius season, let your weirdo flag fly high, you know, like let your inner weirdo out, because that's part of how we find our authentic self. That's how we find our what really switches us on, and how we participate in society in a way that is more holistic, is when we let our weirdness show, we find other weirdos, and then we find our people. And that's very Aquarius, is like not the not your blood family, but Aquarius is where we find our soul family. And I think of sometimes the kumbaya circles or, these different places where we find our people, and it just clicks and you feel so good. And, you find these circles of people where completely sober, you feel high after hanging out with them. That's very Aquarius. And there was that movie not too long ago, I think it was called Wonderlust. It's so bad, but it was these people that were living in a commune, and it was like a kumbaya community. And although I won't spoil the movie, but there was a part of the movie where the kumbaya, it was leaving them in this place where they were quite high. That I think we need to find our people, no matter what your views are in the world. We have to find our people. And so this is also some of the homework for this time, is like, let your weirdo show.
Yeah.
So you can find your fellow weirdos. Yeah. We're all weird. Let's just face it. We're all weird. We're all quirky and weird. But so when I was looking for looking at the astrology of Aquarius season, I need to back up a little bit in order to really understand what's going on, because it's January 19th when the sun moves into Aquarius. However, when the sun moves into Aquarius, we have Venus retrograde still happening. We talked about this in the Capricorn podcast. We also have the Mercury retrograde still happening. So we're starting with the two most personal planets retrograde. And when Mercury stationed retrograde on January 14th, it was only 5 days before the sun moved into Aquarius, into Aquarius. Mercury and Uranus are like minutes away from coming into an exact square. And this exact square is going to, or this near square, it's actually the same degree, just not the minutes. Like, it's so close, it should be considered a square. Is really important, because what it does is it infuses this entire retrograde and Aquarius season with the frequency of genius. And the Venus retrograde, if people were paying attention to that, the guidance was let go, let go, let go, let go, let go. And now build, 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 build. And when you're letting go of everything that's not in integrity or not in alignment with your values. And as you're building, you're rebuilding your relationships, your pathways to prosperity, your harmony points, just your life, your inner structures, so that you can be more harmonious in the way that you move forward into the whole year of 2022. And so when this Mercury stationed retrograde on the 14th, and we get this infusion of genius, it's almost like right before Aquarius season begins, we get this stroke of insight, or this great inspiration. And I wanted to say this because I know you're not going to listen to this till at least the beginning of Aquarius season, but can you close your eyes for a moment and just scan back over the last week and check in if you had a great idea that fizzled away, or if you had an insight or something that almost seemed too idealistic to be true, but I want you to grab it, pull it in, almost like you're pulling a kite in on a string, and just bring that idea back into this season, because we are in this, it's like a machine of change right now, like change is happening so fast. And Aquarius is a fixed sign, which can sometimes be stubborn and not want change. And it's an oxymoron again in itself, because it's the innovator, but it's fixed. It can be super stubborn. So bring that idea in. And the day before Aquarius season begins, Uranus, which is one of the rulers of Aquarius, stations direct. And that's happening in Taurus. And so we have this stroke of insight. And then one of the things that's holding you back gets released. And there's a bit of forward moving action through Aquarius season, but we're still not meant to really take action yet. We're meant to take these ideas inside and continue working with them and bring them into this co-creative space between your imagination and what your imagination is receiving, or your intellect and the ideas that your imagination is receiving. Because whatever ideas, whatever you're creating, whatever you're working on, it's still in this like percolation stage. It's not the cup of coffee isn't ready to drink yet. You have to leave the cup under there till it's all dripped down, right? And so you want to wait and let the coffee make itself, like complete itself before you take any action. That's the first major thing to acknowledge as we go into Aquarius season. And then the second thing is that Mars moves into Capricorn on January 24th. So 4 or 5 days afterwards, depending on where you are in the world, because it's 4:52 a.m. PST. So, the Europeans, it will be the day before. And then Mercury, that is in retrograde, also moves back into Capricorn. And so we get, even though it's Aquarius, it's going to be quite a Saturnian Aquarius season, in that we are meant to take pause, innovate with Uranus, allow the idea to grow inside of ourselves, and start to reconfigure your structures of, or I'll just say your inner structures, because everybody will be a bit different. Some people need to realign the way they're communicating. Some people need to realign the way that their daily life is rolling. Like, I love the people that have these great, incredible goals, but they don't look at how they can adjust their day-to-day activity to bring these goals to life, especially in January after New Year's resolutions and all this stuff. They fizzle because we don't actually change what happens day to day in our lives. And so this is asking you to look at your structures, and are you actually living within structures that allow the things that you want to flourish? It's a big question. And then the Mercury retrograde, it has a visit with Pluto in the sky on January 28th. And so they're conjunct, and they were conjunct before the retrograde, and they'll be conjunct again after the retrograde. But this one I think is quite interesting on January 28th, because Pluto holds secrets, and Mercury retrograde is asking you to go look inside. And because it's Pluto, it's super unforgiving, and it's saying, listen, whatever is built on lies inside of yourself is going to start to crumble. So get honest with yourself, get real with yourself, pay attention to how things feel, allow your life to integrate into a greater expression of your values and your morals. And as these fault lines inside are seen, we might notice that the different power struggles start to show weaknesses. And I'm not talking external. I'm talking your own inner power struggles. That angel and the devil on your shoulder, one saying, do this, and the other saying, you're not good enough. One saying, act this way, and the other saying, wait, that's not loving. Right. And that power struggle, we all have it. This is so mercurial. We all have it. It's going to start to show weakness. And if we work with this really well without taking action just yet, it's inner work first, then you can give the energy and the emotion and the attention to the side of the power struggle that you actually want to win. So the part of you that's more loving, hopefully. I always vote. I always vote for that.
Well, because when you said that thing about really getting real with yourself, I wanted to jump in that moment, and I didn't, because so often for a lot of people, when they get real with themselves, they get harsh with themselves. Like, it's not about, all right, let's get real and look at what we want and open up to what we need to change in order to bring this new piece in. It's looking at it's judging ourselves harshly and saying, well, we're not good enough and we need to get better. And it becomes like sort of this beating down it was like the mean coach who's trying to beat you into doing better, as opposed to the coach. It's actually like saying, well, let's look at what you do every day and see how we can, build resilience into your own system. And so that getting real with yourself is, for different people means different things. So I love the way that you ended that with, hopefully moving into that more loving space. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on January 29th, Venus will station direct, and that will be really lovely, because Venus retrograde, and Venus all the time is benefic planet. It wants to help you come into greater harmony. And so if people are paying attention to how they feel and allow that to be their guide, and when it feels yucky, reassess. And when it feels good, go with that. And really check in how does it feel good? Does it feel good at the cost of somebody else? Because that's disharmonious as well. Or can we find the place where it feels good and also is harmonious? And then we have the Aquarius New Moon on January 31st. Now, this Aquarius New Moon is conjunct Saturn. And okay, so remember how I said in the beginning how some Aquarians are ruled by Saturn and some Aquarians are ruled by Uranus, and they feel different and they often don't get along. Well, for the ones that love their freedom, the more Uranus loving Aquarians, or people that resonate with that more, it could be very challenging. This new moon could show us some restrictions because it's conjunct Saturn, which is boundaries and responsibility. And can you grow up, please? And are you acting in integrity? And if you're not in integrity, I'm going to knock you over. And it's also squaring Uranus over in Taurus, which is, oh man, I look at this and what's going on with Omicron right now, and I just feel like we might see a little bit of restriction come in. And I mean, it just feels like we're just constantly going in through more restrictions, but people might not like it, is basically what I'm saying. But outside of that, everything else about this moon is harmonious. So we have great harmonious energy between Venus, who just stationed retrograde, and Uranus. They're trying each other. And so we look at the themes of Capricorn and Taurus. This is an incredible build energy. This is an incredible, like, worship Mother Earth, or do something good for your body, or get in right relationship with food, with the earth, with your money, right? This is a great money moon. And so what I would suggest for people is to make sure that you are setting intentions with this, because if I took all of that and summed it up into a thing, sometimes we got to give a little something up in order to get what we want. And I'm not saying, I'm not going into the realm of give up freedoms, which is triggering. I'm actually just saying for yourself, like, okay, so if you took it to a marriage, okay, sometimes I just have to let my husband behave this way, but then I get more of this, what I want, in my way. Or with children, like, okay, I'm not going to fight that battle because this battle is more important for me to win. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to let the kids, do this because I need them to go to bed on time.
Well, I'm going to reframe it another way too, because I really have a good relationship with Saturn. I really like Saturn. And every time people say, "Ooh, Saturn," and I'm like, "Oh, Saturn, love you." But one of the things, like in this conjunct new moon, to think about, as opposed to, Saturn's really, snagging up on freedom, is what are the structures of Saturn that support me that I have not actually recognized and appreciated? Because even amidst all the things that sometimes feel like they're taking our freedom, is often structures that allow us to have freedom that they were kind of invisible to us. And so really beginning to look at what supports me that I haven't really given proper acknowledgement to, that I can appreciate and invite more of in my life, so I have that solid foundation on which to be free. Because, freedom without any kind of a foundation to be free on is just kind of, it can be really chaotic. But freedom built on something that gives you a foundation to really express that and enjoy that can be really enriching.
Yeah. And right now I'm running this Venus retrograde group. I'm taking people through the time. And the big question that I've been asking people one of the big questions was, what systems or structures in your own life are you participating in that are taking you away from greater health? Right. And so when I look at this, it's actually, Saturn is never trying to take us down. Saturn is only ever trying to help us. And so if we look at it from that perspective, like, wow, I actually sit down and eat a bag of potato chips for dinner most nights instead of making myself a nice meal, and that's not contributing to my health, then we can look at that system that you've developed in your habitual patterning and reconfigure it. Maybe on Sundays, I just need to make a giant pot of chili or a giant pot of stew or a giant curry. So I have food as fast as a bag of chips to grab, right? It takes a little bit of effort in order to have a greater outcome.
And then even looking at something like, to extend that metaphor, that even though the bag of chips is an easy thing to grab, and, grabbing easy stuff is often what we do, when we look at the whole process of food production and how you can go to a store and buy pretty much anything you want to, because they have this structure, for better or for worse, of food production. And, that structure of food production can bring you potato chips, and it can bring you spinach, and it can bring, and you get to choose within that. But without that structure of being able to bring you any food that you could possibly want, basically, anytime you go to the grocery store. I mean, it's truly magnificent. Some of these structures, as kind of toxic as some of that stuff has become in many ways, the ability to have that structure in place, it's a very Saturn sort of thing, really
Mhm.
allows us a level of freedom that we wouldn't have if we didn't have easily accessible food.
Yeah. And I think more people have woken up to the magic of those systems being in place this year than ever before.
I think so. Yeah.
Like we take it for granted, but
and how fragile they can be if we don't, look at them, with some sustainability in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then as we carry on through the Aquarius season, we have Sun conjunct Saturn on February 4th. And so that is such a good, well, sorry, I'm going to actually back up. On February 3rd, Mercury stations direct.
Mm-hmm.
And from February 3rd till April 29th, we have all planets direct. And the very next day, Sun is conjunct Saturn. And just as you said, we want to be in right relationship with Saturn. And I look at this and I'm just like, now is the time to act with integrity and discipline and attention and fortitude and get it done. So everything up until February 3rd is like the planning stage. What is my vision? How do I want to do this? What's my highest? How do I act with integrity? How do I stay in alignment with my values? And you make the plan and the strategy slowly over time. And then we have from February 4th till April 29th, where it's go time. Like, let's go, let's get it done. There's not going to be as many blocks getting in the way of what you want to do, which is so nice. And then when I looked at the rest of the month's astrology, it's kind of wild. We have a full moon on the 16th in Leo, and the Leo full moon, I mean, I love Leo. I think Leo is fantastic. I have to admit, I have a hard time seeing Leo always because it's in my 12th house for the astrology nerds out there. But I love it because, first of all, it's fun. It's fun loving. It's playful. Sometimes it gets a little bit dramatic, but it's a time of creative expression. And when we look at the Leo full moon, the only thing it's aspecting is the sun. Nothing else. This moon is free. There's it's like a creative license. You want to reinvent yourself? Now's the time. You want to change your image? You want to try out a new style? Yes, go for it. You also want to change, you want to rebrand your business? You are in the realm of rebranding. It's like, what have you always wanted to do that you always held a little bit close inside and were scared to do it? We want to activate the courage of the Leo heart and the boldness and just say, okay, now's the time. I'm going to do this. Let's make this happen. And so it's a great moon. I'm excited for this moon, and it's outside of the retrogrades, all planets direct. Wow. And and Uranus and Jupiter are in a sextile, but that's only expanding the innovation. And Venus and Mars are conjunct, which is like bringing together the masculine and the feminine together, like they're working together so we can come into this balance of our masculine and our feminine self, our receptivity and our action, our responsibilities and our free flowing love. We can, I guess we wouldn't typically say responsibilities in Mars. That wouldn't be a Mars word, but like our actions, like what we're doing, the passion, bringing our passion in alignment with our values and also our prosperity. So it's an incredible moon. And then the rest of the month, like there's very little aspects. It's so quiet in the sky. Wow. February 11th has a bit of action. Like Pluto is trine the nodes, which is helping us to get in alignment with our purpose. On the same day, Mercury is trine the nodes, and Mercury is conjunct Pluto. So February 11th, it's like something breaks. It's a breakthrough day. And then we have that full moon. And then that's Aquarius season. And so it's really giving you, as much as that new moon is saying, here may be some restrictions, it's giving you so much freedom this Aquarius season to be who you are and to create your life. And I think this is an important season to mark, because I think if we look at least where I am, when I talk to people are sick of the pandemic. They're over it. They just want their life back. They, the endurance test is wearing thin on us, but it's also creating this a little bit of rebellious energy, like, oh, just let me live. Right. Like, and then at the same time, there's a caution of like, oh, but I don't want to get sick. And this is spreading like wildfire right now.
So the other part of what you're saying though, too, is, everybody's saying, I want my life back. I want to go back to normal, which of course is done. And that was 2 years ago. There's no normal left. But what you're talking about toward the end of this time is that we have this period where we can rethink what we want to do and begin to implement who we want to be going forward.
That's right.
Because 2 years ago is over and done. The world has changed. There's no going back. There is only really reconfiguring and moving forward.
That's exactly where that rant was going, where it's like, okay, here we are now. Like, get really present with who you are now, and reinvent yourself. What do you want to do? The world has changed so much. And I think that's another thing that people have come to. It's like, I wasted so much of my life doing this, or even just in the pandemic, like, I've spent all this time in fear. I don't want to be in fear anymore. I've spent all this time holed up in my house. I don't want to do that anymore. Or maybe even reconfiguring your relationship with your space, that it is freedom, right? So yes, it's a really beautiful time. I hope that people can see that inside of the external, I don't know, I want to say fear factory, but I don't know if that's the right thing to say.
Well, okay. So, but it's not, it is. And yet one of the things to remember is that fear sells. And so the news is really not about giving us news. I mean, there are some news sources that do that, but for the most part, most news has become not like the thing that networks did that was sort of outside the profit structure, to something that has become the core of profit structures for a lot of venues. And so they have to, just like Elon Musk said, it doesn't really matter what I think personally, I have to follow where the profits take me. It's the same thing with the news. They're really bound by whatever their structures are to do the things that sells the most, and fear sells. And so if you think about it in terms of, they're just really speaking to, what brings in the most money, as opposed to speaking what's actually happening in the world. And you can step back from the idea that I need to be part of this mania around fear, that's really just a mania around, how to make money selling fear, which is not even fear itself. It's just like, how do we follow the money? And you step back and say, wow, I don't want to be a part of that kind of profit structure. And keep stepping back away from that and choosing your own life and choosing what you want to do. And I think it's really interesting that we have this wide open space right before, isn't it? Right before the exact of the US Pluto return in the end of February.
February 22nd, right as we move into Pisces. We'll talk about that in Pisces season.
We will, but take advantage of this open space. Because it's a big, that in combination with that particular aspect, especially for the US and anything that's affected by the US, which is most everything everywhere these days. It's a time to really be thoughtful about what it is that you want in this time of complete refiguring of who we are as a global community.
Yeah, it's so true. And fear can also be amazing doorways. So like, that's one avenue of fear, but people have all kinds of fears. And if we can, on that Leo full moon on February 16th, look at what our fear is and face it. A little teaser for Pisces season is, Pisces is the elder. It's the end of life. And one of the greatest fears that is holding us back from living pervasively across all humanity, all cultures, all religions, all everywhere, all ideologies, all beliefs, all of it, is our fear of death. And if we can face our fear of death, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in Pisces season, we actually come more alive. And so if that is the root driving a lot of even the innovations, I was listening to this guy go on a rant yesterday about, they're making technologies that will allow you to live longer, or in some of the Elon Musk stuff where you can upload your consciousness into a cloud, and your consciousness will carry on for all eternity. Like, what is motivating us to create technology like that? It's the fear of death, right?
Well, and I want to add even more to the fear of death, because we have two different fears around that. We've got the fear of the physical death, of our body being, inert, and then what happens after that. But we have this, I think it's actually a bigger fear in some ways, is we have a fear of the ego death, the death of our perception of self.
Absolutely.
And that's something, I know, isn't it? But that's something that if we can come to terms with not so much the death of the ego self, because the ego has an important aspect to who we are, but but to be open and willing to walk through what that means, you can come out the end of that in this life, still with your body working, fully transformed. And so there's that aspect of death as well, which I think is a lot of what is happening now is asking us to let go of all that does not work, not just, on various parts of our life, but at a core foundational level for us personally and us as a human community. What is it that needs to die so that we can actually live?
Well, we are just totally treading into Pisces season now.
All right, well, we'll get to Pisces then. Okay, well, we'll end with our Aquarius here. Is there any last thoughts on Aquarius you want to give us before we sign off?
Yeah, if one thing that I like to tease people with is if we have technology that allows us to send information from a receiver, or sorry, from a transmitter to a receiver, why can't we believe that we can do that with ourselves in our own telepathy, in our own like clairvoyance and the psychic airwaves? And I think if one of the things that Uranus in Taurus is teaching us, and a multitude of aspects in the sky, is that we're moving into becoming a psychic society for some people. And technology has shown us that it's possible. And Aquarius season wants you to remember that it's possible in you. So keep listening. I always say, keep listening until you can hear everyone's thoughts. You still have listening skills to develop.
Totally true. All right. Well, thank you so much for our conversation on Aquarius. You can find Jana's information and her website and a discount into her membership program at conversationsfromtheedge.net or on the show notes. And really come back and listen to Pisces and listen to the ones before this too, especially if you want to begin to look at how to live through each year as a series of rebirth and growth, and again, another rebirth. Thank you again, Jana. We will talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you.
This is your host, Kristine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.